So, you're interested in stories where the individual tests themselves, where the hero overcomes or faces insurmountable odds, but you're not interested in reading the next adventures of Katniss and Peeta. The idea of kids being lost in a perilous maze is just too unrealistic for you. In fact, worlds populated by humans existing in an exceptionally depressing and bleak reality, that's not your thing. Well, then you might like stories of wilderness survival. You want stories about real life, stories that pit the hero against perils of isolation in the natural world, tales or true life accounts of things that could actually happen, as unbelievable as they might be. Well then, wilderness survival stories might be for you. The great thing about these stories is that they can be found in both fiction and non-fiction forms, so if made-up stories just don't interest you, there are all kinds of accounts of real-life wilderness survival. Today we'll look at two examples of wilderness survival stories. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, the fictional account of 9-year-old Tricia McFarlane's ordeal lost in the remote New Hampshire woods, and Into the Wild, the true story of Christopher McCandless's journey of self-discovery and self-imposed exile in the Alaskan wilderness. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon was written by Stephen King in 2000. Now, King is best known for his many horror novels, Carrie, It, The Shining, and many more. But don't be turned off if horror is not for you. This novel is a departure for King, and Tricia McFarlane's challenges are firmly grounded in the natural world. 9-year-old Tricia becomes separated from her mother and older brother while hiking on a 6-mile section of New Hampshire's portion of the Appalachian Trail. At first, Tricia's nervous, but not too concerned. She's familiar with hiking, knows her way around the woods, has a lunch and water, and is confident that she'll find her way back to the trail and her family eventually. However, as she goes deeper into the woods and daylight begins to fade, fear starts to set in, and she makes a realization. The woods around Sanford, her home, the woods her mother walked, sometimes with Tricia and sometimes alone, they were toy woods. These were not toy woods. Tricia uses her limited knowledge of bushcraft and strong-willed common sense to overcome the many physical challenges she faces alone in the woods for more than a week. She starts out as a fairly typical, if strong-willed 9-year-old girl. She loves pop music and movies and her daddy. But the ordeal in the woods forces her to draw upon strength, courage, ingenuity, and resolve she didn't know she had. Perhaps the greatest challenge Tricia faces in the woods is the psychological strain caused by isolation. In the beginning, listening to the Red Sox games on her radio helps keep the loneliness at bay. However, as the batteries die, she begins to talk with her hero, Red Sox pitcher Tom Gordon, and hallucinates him accompanying her on her journey. Gordon's presence gives her the strength to keep going when she's at her absolute limits. With Tricia's story, King does an excellent job paralleling the physical and psychological aspects of wilderness survival. Into the Wild is the true story of 24-year-old Christopher McCandless. The book was written by John Krakauer in 1996. Krakauer is an adventure writer and reporter for Outside magazine, and he's best known perhaps for his book Into Thin Air, which is an account of the 1997 Mount Everest climbing tragedy. Into the Wild began as an article Krakauer wrote for Outside magazine in 1993. He claims he became obsessed with McCandless's story and eventually realized he needed to write a book. Christopher McCandless experienced a typical late 20th century upbringing in suburban Washington. However, after graduating from university, his path takes a decidedly different turn. He severs all ties with his friends and family, gives the $25,000 he'd saved for law school away to charity, burns his identification, starts calling himself Alexander Supertramp, and spends the next 2 years traveling around the United States. McCandless is described as a small, passionate young man who was extremely charismatic and very likable despite his unorthodox views and stubborn nature. Krakauer's book is more than just a chronicle of McCandless's many adventures, but a real attempt to understand who he was and why he embarked on this wandering lifestyle. The book is based upon both McCandless's journals and the author's interviews with his friends and family. McCandless believed that returning to nature and releasing himself from material things would bring him true happiness. He quotes the nature poet Lord Byron often in his own writing, and Krakauer feels this quotation best summed up McCandless's beliefs. There is a pleasure in the pathless woods. There is a rapture on the lonely shore. There is society where none intrudes, by the deep sea and music in its roar. I love not the man less, but nature more. From these are interviews in which I steal from all I may be or have been before, to mingle with the universe and feel what I can ne'er express, yet cannot all conceal. Lord Byron. The book culminates with what McCandless called his Alaskan Odyssey. He wanted to prove that he could be completely self-sufficient alone in the wilderness. He told friends that he intended to return to a more normal lifestyle after Alaska. On April 28, 1992, he walked alone into the Alaskan wilderness. He had 10 pounds of rice, a semi-automatic rifle with 400 rounds of ammunition, several books including one on local plant life, and some camping equipment. He assumed he could forage for edible plants and hunt game. He would spend the next 113 days alone in the wild.